Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court appointed and private, marriage coaching using the emotional focused therapy method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in both French or English and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMB therapy and coaching services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachddanamzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our fifth episode of season 24, a very special guest and host of the Good Mood Revolution podcast, Matt O'Neill. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Matt, the floor is yours.
Dr. Dan, what's up, brother?
Yes, doing good.
Man, yes, it's very exciting to be here with you. I'm a big fan, and I'm a big fan of you because you're making a positive difference in people's happiness.
Beautiful.
And I don't think there's any more of a noble calling than to help people feel happier. Because what every single person wants, every single thing we do is to feel happy. And yet, we're not happy, most of us. So all the things we've been doing to become happy, and they're not working. So the reason this is why I'm on my passion. My passion is to help people find how you can actually grow your happiness. Happiness is a skill. It's a skill that we can get better at with the right practice. Now, of course, we can do the wrong things and it doesn't work. But what we want to talk about is things that are actually going to make us happier. And that's what I'm excited to share today.
Thank you so much, Matt. I think you and I, the universe, found a way to get us together and for you to be able to participate in this podcast. And also because you are your host of your own podcast of Good Mood Revolution. And I think that the purpose of your podcast and the happiness journey, I think there's some intrinsic correlation between both. And I think we're going to talk today about why happiness, even though it's one of the most important pillar of a human being when it comes to living their life happy, why is so many people having difficulty in understand what makes them happy? What is the purpose for them to become happy? Is it material asset? Is it like a big mansion by the ocean? Is it like exotic cars? Is it having a good relationship with their spouse or their kids? What does happiness means to each and everyone? And you and I will agree that it is very a subjective experience, because what makes me happy doesn't necessarily make you happy. So it cannot go or fall into the objective realm of what happiness means. So for you, Matt, doing this podcast of the Good Mood Revolution, do you think that happiness is a choice or a feeling?
Wow. Dr. Dan, I actually want to just back up before that question because I do think happiness is universal. I think the things that make you happy are the same things that make me happy. Happiness comes from a connection with everything else. And what I mean by that is when our hearts are wide open and we're feeling loving and inspired, that's when we feel joyful. And when our hearts close, and this is when we listen to the mind, and typically the mind is selfish and wants us to do selfish things. It's thinking about our own survival. And when we're closing our hearts and becoming selfish, universally, we become unhappy. So maybe the things that open your heart are different than mine, or maybe the things that make you feel inspired are different than mine. However, when your heart is open and you're feeling loving, and when you're feeling inspired, you're happy. And when I'm feeling loving and when I'm feeling inspired, I'm happy. And universally, when the world is feeling loving and inspired, they're happy. And when they're feeling selfish and self-centered, they're unhappy. So I do think happiness is a universal thing. It is both a choice. It's a choice to open our heart or close it. And it's a feeling. It's a feeling of being inspired and feeling connected and loving. So it's both of these things. But what happens is most of us don't understand that we're the ones that are opening our heart and we're the ones who are closing our heart, because no one has taught us. No one has taught us. But there's no other being inside of you that is closing your heart. There's no outside force that causes your heart to close. So I know we were talking before this podcast started about another hurricane coming your way, coming to Tampa. Now, a hurricane coming can cause us to feel anxious and fearful. and we may even start to get angry. There's only 8 bad moods that we all experience as human beings. And so anger and fear are 2 of those 8 bad moods. It could make us feel hopeless, which is another one of the bad moods. Could make us even feel guilty, thinking, okay, we kind of deserve this. Humanity deserves to be punished. All of these things are untrue. The 8 bad moods are untrue. And we could keep our heart open through the experience of protecting our home and protecting our family. Like, just imagine this is a different experience where I'm not fearful and I'm not angry and I'm not guilty and I'm not hopeless. Instead, I'm saying, well, hey, hurricanes are a part of life. And I love my family so much, I'm going to protect my home. So I'm going to put up plywood on the windows to protect our family home. And then I'm going to pray and trust that however this turns out is going to work out. Even if my home gets destroyed, I'm going to pray and trust that there's going to be a way forward for me. And then I'm going to love my family and I'm going to get them out of here because
Yes.
hey, yes, is it inconvenience for my work if I leave? Sure. But I just saw that a hurricane killed 200 people in North Carolina who did not evacuate. So just using precaution, we're going to go to a hotel somewhere that's out of the hurricane's path. And I could totally stay open-hearted through this whole experience and stay happy as my life is inconvenienced.
Mhm.
And this is, we were talking about stoicism as well. Hey, what can I control? We actually can't control if our heart closes or not, which means we can control our happiness.
That's a good one, actually. But if, let's say, we look at the situation where everyone who goes and move down to Florida, or even Hurricane Alley in Arkansas, whatever it is, do you think that we deliberately know that we will face circumstances such as hurricane or tornadoes, whatever it is, but we make the choice, so we should accept what may be the repercussion of those choices? So then at this point, we are aware that there are great possibility for us to be able to experience what we experienced during Helene and what we will with Milton that is coming this coming week. So do you think that at this point we should not complain?
No, complaining doesn't help us at all. In complaining, this is more selfishness and more ego. If we're a child and we're born in Florida, then we don't have a choice. We're kind of at the mercy of our parents. If they decide to evacuate, they chose to live there. If we're an adult, if we're over 18, it is now our choice. Do I choose to stay living here, knowing that hurricanes come to the southeast of the United States, or do I choose to live in a place where it's high likelihoods of tornadoes? It's my choice. And we could start to say, well, but it's not my choice. I have children, they need to be close to their mom, their grandmother. And so there's really no choice. I have to be here, but that's untrue.
Okay.
Responsibility is a counter to negativity. And when we start to recognize we are responsible for absolutely every circumstance and responsible for our entire life and all of the choices we make, we get out of victim, selfish thinking, like this is happening to me. Why me? That's all going to make us feel bad. And we move into powerful thinking, which is I'm actually in control of a lot more than I admit. And like you said, we are in control of where we live. So I live in Charleston, South Carolina. It is inevitable Charleston, South Carolina will have a destructive hurricane in my lifetime. Inevitable. We evacuate every single year. Schools have been shut down already twice this year. And it's like, okay, I am still choosing to live in Charleston, South Carolina. And I know that there are destructive hurricanes that'll come this way.
So
So when they come, it is only suffering for me to say they shouldn't come. And I'm fully able to stay happy knowing that hurricanes will come and saying, I'm choosing to live here even though.
okay, so then at this point, Matt, if let's say external circumstances that occur that is completely out of our control, and we basically have the positive mindset to be able to only welcome positive things in our life, and then of course deal with the negative when they do come. But obviously, life is no sunshine and rainbow. We're always going to be hit with either sickness, divorces, financial ruins, and so on and so forth. So someone who is dealing with good things happening in their life, it's very easy to be happy. But for those who are dealing with chaos, when do we implement happiness?
When we decide that life is always sunshine and rainbows, and that even the challenges and even what we're calling chaos are actually very loving things that are happening for the evolution of our soul, and that nothing is ever wrong, that there's no coincidences, that we chose to come. So this is just a different life view, right? A life view of life is no sunshine and rainbows, and that there's a bunch of destruction and a bunch of things to feel bad about. We're going to become world weary, right? Where I'm world weary. There's so many bad things, so many tragedies, one after another, keep hitting me and hitting me and hitting me. That's one view. I am recommending a completely different view because that's just a story. And it's our stories define how much our heart is open or how much our heart is closed. So one story is life is very tough
Mhm.
and you just have to endure it. And when my external circumstances go well, I can be happy. And when my external circumstances don't go well, I can't be happy. Totally valid point, right? It's a very good story to tell yourselves. The whole world's telling themselves that story, and you'll never be happy with that story. It's impossible. So there's a completely different story because like life is change. Everyone gets sick. All the people we know get sick. We get sick. We're all going to die. Everything's going to change. Your economics are going to go up and down. Your finances are going to go up and down. Storms are going to come and storm. If we can't learn to be happy through change, then we can never be happy. And so I want to teach a different story.
Okay.
Here's a different story. That my different story is a story of eternity. We are eternal beings. We chose our parents as an eternal being before we were born in this life. We looked at options and we said, I want to choose that life, those parents, even though those going to be a really tough upbringing. And I want that experience because it's going to enrich my soul. So as I went through hard things as a child, I actually put myself into that fire because I wanted to grow and become a greater expression of myself. And now, as things change, as people I love get sick and die, as hurricanes come and cause destruction, it's happening for the evolution of my eternal soul because every single challenging situation adds to me. I become better. I become more compassionate. I become more loving. I become more understanding. I've been through more. I can coach and help other people go through more. So thank you, God, for all the challenge, for all the things that other people are saying are terrible. I'm saying thank you for this growth and this understanding. This is not, I could have not gotten it any other way than through the hardship. So thank you so much. This is so beautiful. This is really how I believe. I believe that every single thing that happens is happening for us.
But then, okay, so let's say we look at what's going on in the Middle East with Israel being bombarded with different countries wanting to annihilate all the Jews and all. So they live day in and day out with being bombarded with missiles and so on and so forth. When is there any open space for them to be happy? Now, I know you cannot talk for them, but if they're constantly, you face negativity, you face the whole world being against them, constantly against Israel, how can you even give yourself the time to be, oh, wow, there's peace now. We could be happy because there's never peace. So then it never comes.
There is always peace, the peace of God, always. And you know that this is where our ego wants to go. Our ego wants to say, well, what you're saying isn't true because of that circumstance that I don't directly know. The only circumstance that we can understand and find God's grace is in our own circumstance.
Okay.
And so, sure, we can point to the child that was raped and murdered and say that wasn't happening for that child, right? But we're not that child and we're not that family. And I can point to all the different war zones in Ukraine and the Middle East, and I can say it's not graceful for them. It's not graceful for them. Or we could point to the people in North Carolina, 200 of which just died from the storm. We could say, hey, it's not graceful for them. But this is a truism. Everything is grace for me.
Okay.
In my experience, everything that ever happens to me, good or bad, is happening for the evolution of my soul. And so I can look at all the terrible things that have been done to me as a child. I can look at the travesties and the people who've died that I love very much here in my life. And I can see ultimately there is a truth here that it's all happening for the greater good, that everything is working out in the most loving way possible because everybody is eternal. We are all eternal. We are all just on an eternal growth game. And if I lived in that life of somebody that was living under persecution of a government or another outside force, another outside agency, I would be experiencing extreme fear, extreme anger, extreme hatred. And my job would be to understand how can I grow and rise above it. And if I die, then I'm an eternal soul. I die, I see, okay, all right, well, I lived a lot in a lot of fear and a lot of anger and a lot of hate. Now maybe I can understand not to do that to other people the next time I have a go on this earth so that I don't create this fear and this anger and this hate like maybe I've done in lifetimes in the past. So we're always just experiencing things and growing and evolving into a more compassionate, loving being.
So how do you elevate yourself, Matt? I mean, you're talking about elevating your soul despite all the intricacies of negativity that's going on in this world. How would you suggest to any of our listeners out there that are going through chaos or hectic lives or financial ruins, or those in North Carolina or South Carolina or Virginia or Florida that have lost their homes, just, especially after all the hurricanes that have been passing by the route. Um, what would you suggest them to tell them, okay, well, don't look at all the negative things and start focusing on the positive. But there's not 1 ounce of positive in their mind to say, what's the point of rebuilding if it's going to be destroyed again?
That's the emotion of hopelessness. And there's only 8 negative moods. Hopelessness, the what's the point, is a very destructive negative mood because it says there's so much negativity that what's the point? What's the use? Hopelessness is just an emotion though. It's not a truth. And there's always use. So one of the exercises that I help people use, it's called connecting the dots. I
Okay.
ask you to look at 1 or 2 really negative events that you didn't want to have happen in your past. For me, my dad abandoning us and being really abusive when I was young, that's an event that was extremely hard to go through. It wasn't one that I want to relive. And it's not one where the emotions that I started to find about myself were that as a young child in first grade, I'm telling my teachers I want to take my own life, right? Like I got into an emotional hopelessness at a young age. I don't want to relive that experience. However, when I look at a really negative experience like that, and I say, okay, that happened, but it had to happen. So what are the good things that came out of it? Well, man, the good thing that came out of it is I said, I want to figure out human emotions when I get older so that I can teach other people how not to suffer. So that event that looked really negative, that I didn't want to have happen, that absolutely I would have rejected, and if I had a choice, turned into one of the most important events of my entire life. And so once we start to connect back in our own lives, okay, that was a negative event. Hey, and then in my college years, I was very, very mean to my girlfriend and I cheated on her and she then broke my heart, right? So that was a really negative event. I could say I'm so awful, right? When I could say I'm so guilty and I'm so destructive, or I could say that had to happen. So that negative event of me cheating on my girlfriend and her breaking my heart and then going and marrying somebody else, that turned me into somebody that wanted to live with integrity, that didn't want to harm people that love me. So that when I met my wife, Katie, I knew I would never break her trust. And that now we have this beautiful life with these 4 children. So these super negative events in our past, when we connect the dots forward and say, why did that happen for me? What are the good things that came out of that really painful thing? And we're like, wow, okay, it always has turned into better because of the negative. That means I can live through this current storm where my home was knocked down, and even though I don't want this to happen, I can trust that this is forging me into the greatest version of myself yet, because every other disaster forged me into a greater version of myself. So I'll rebuild a home. Maybe it won't be in North Carolina. Maybe it'll be in Michigan, or maybe it'll be in Chicago, or maybe it'll be in Charleston, or wherever we want to live. But I'll rebuild a home. I'll restart, and I'm going to learn so much from this experience I couldn't have learned any other way. This is happening for me right now. But we can't be there if we're living in hopelessness. So my book, Good Mood Revolution, talks about the 8 negative moods. And there is a signature thought pattern for each of these 8 negative moods. And the beautiful thing is, there's also an easy way out of each of the 8 negative moods. So if we find ourselves in hopelessness or anger or fear or pride or lust, hey, that's fine. It's just normal. All of us get there. And then let's read Matt's book and get out of that negative emotion so we can start to get into positive emotions.
Now, things changes when mental illness is involved. So someone who's dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder or any type of trauma from childhood, how can you, I mean, would you just say, well, just get yourself a psychiatrist, get your medication to be able to not deal too much with the symptoms of PTSD? Or it's hard to say to someone who's dealing with mental illness, snap out of it. You can't. So in
Mm.
this case, if PTSD is involved, how do you change the way that you're wired mentally, emotionally, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. And I totally agree with you that I would never say snap out of it to someone that's dealing with a mental illness. That's that's a that's just adds shame to an already really difficult situation. Like we can't just snap out of bipolar 2 disorder. We can't just snap out of PTSD.
Exactly.
right? And what we can do is we can say, I am designed perfectly. All of my life experiences are for me. The way that I've been designed, God designed me like this. And I that experience, that was an experience that was supposed to happen. So yeah, I have this mental illness now, and there are treatments for it. There are people that are helping people with PTSD. I know them. You know them. You know, they can come and talk with you, Dr. Dan. And there are methods to help with PTSD. There are methods to help with bipolar 2. There are methods to help with autism or neurodiversity, right? And I might want to take my medication because that's part of the method. And I want to take this action plan, and maybe it's meditation, maybe it's breath work, maybe it's psychiatry, whatever the methods are that I'm praying and I'm being guided to, I'm going to do those methods. And then in addition to those methods, I'm going to practice not staying stuck in negative moods. I'm going to practice choosing the 8 good moods that Matt talks about. And this all goes back again to responsibility. I'm not a victim. Just because I have cancer, right? I don't have cancer. I'm just saying it for an example. If I'm sick and I have cancer, I could say I'm a victim, or I could go find the best doctors I can find.
Mhm.
And I can take the best treatment I can afford. And I can take responsibility and say, yeah, this is happening. I don't want it to happen. And I have this eternal view. It's going to enrich my soul in some way. And it's my responsibility to take the best action I can right now. So whether it's cancer or it's a mental illness, where it's our responsibility to take the best action we can. And this is how we're going to get into good moods. I've met cancer patients, people who are in their last year, who are so happy and they are so grateful. And yeah, they're going through a really hard thing, but their view of life is beautiful. And we can have that with an open heart, regardless of what we're facing.
So do you think that those who do not fear death are the one who's going to find happiness?
Yes, Dr. Dan, of course. And I did. I didn't have a great God view in my 20s.
Okay.
And they were my darkest times. And I used to look at people who had this view of God and an eternity, an eternal soul, and I'd say, yeah, I can tell they're happier than me, but they're pretty stupid because it's all just science. And I dove deep into science. But there's always this fear that I'm going to die and that's it. And when I have this fear that this is all that there is, and it's not true, it's just this, again, it's very ego, it's very mental, it's very thought, it's very in our minds. When we listen to our minds and we think this is it, we cannot find lasting happiness. Then we have to try to control all the conditions of our life. Everything has to be perfect. No hurricanes can come, no disease can come, no finances can get disrupted, nothing can go wrong, and then I'll be happy. But that's not possible. Everything is going wrong all the time. So the first step, if we don't have a view of eternity, is to start looking into spiritual practices and find eternity, because the truth is always within. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within. Buddha says to look within. Once we go within and we find eternity within ourselves, not from what a book says or a dogma says, but when we find our own view of it, then we can start to build a happy life.
So before we conclude this podcast, I'd like you to be able to share with our listeners, where can people find you? They want to be able to learn about those moods, how to get out of those bad moods. Where can they contact you, or how can they contact you?
Well, the first thing is that I just love your podcast. And I love that you're like just helping people feel better in their life. And I think we can use more of that. So then, if you're looking for a second happiness podcast to add on to Dr. Dan's happiness podcast, check out the Good Mood Revolution. And it's just a once a week show where we talk about how to get out of negative moods and how to get into positive moods. And I do think whatever we put in our mind comes out of our mouth. So rather than watching anxiety-inducing news or social media or really awful TV shows where people are cutting off each other's heads, why don't we listen to podcasts every day about how to be happier and then just live happier? It's so much better than true crime.
Beautiful. So true. Well, Matt, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your happiness podcast. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode, and also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 24 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories just like the one that you listened today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Happiness is a choice and a feeling, not because life is perfect, but because we have the power to decide how we respond to it. When challenges arise, we can choose to focus on the small joys and moments of gratitude rather than dwelling on the hardships. Every day offers a new opportunity to shift our perspective, to see setbacks as lessons and pain as growth. Happiness doesn't come from avoiding struggles, but from embracing them with strength and hope. Even in tough times, we can control our mindset, find meaning in adversity, and choose to seek the light. Happiness is a decision we make each day, one that empowers us to rise above the storm. My name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.